Using my previous video about themes in the Old Testament as a stepping off point, I want to talk about the themes of creation and how covenant fit into the greater Old Testament storyline. While there are many themes of the Old Testament, there is one overarching theme that runs through its veins. God has never and will never leave his people. In fact, God straight up promises that he won't leave his people in Deuteronomy 31:8. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid, do not be discouraged. We see this repeatedly play out when Israel does something sinful and turns its back on God. God mourns when his people turn away from him, but he never leaves them to fend for themselves. In my previous video, I talked about how creation was more than just God creating the world, but that he continues to create new things and revive old things throughout the Old Testament. God, being the creator, created the world as his dwelling place. In his original design, he created people in his image to dwell with him there. The most fascinating thing about this is that God was seen. Man walked with God, literally side by side. His intention in creation was to have relationship with us. If you force someone to love you, do they really love you? Or do they pretend and put on a good show because they have to, afraid of any punishment? God wanted a real and genuine love from his people, so he gave his created beings free will. This was a huge thing because now we chose to love him ourselves. It wasn't forced and there wasn't any pressure. We love him because we chose to. While we are made in the image of God, we fail to reflect the character of God. As much as Adam and Eve loved God, they also had the free will to choose sin, which they did. They separated us from God, and we could no longer walk with him. God refused to be separate from his people, so he created a salvation plan that we see in Genesis 3:14 through 15. So the Lord God said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." God had the opportunity to stamp out humanity, but instead he provides hope. Creation as the theme continues through the whole Old Testament as God pushes his people to be like him so the rest of creation can see the one true God, Yahweh. He continues to use his creation to bring restoration to broken lands and broken people. He doesn't stop with the Israelites either. They're just the vessel he uses to make his name known. We see a woman named Rahab, a prostitute and foreigner, hide 2 Israelite spies in her home to keep them from being imprisoned and killed. She had heard what the Lord had done for the Israelites, and she proclaimed, "For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below." But just from hearing what God had done, she knew he was the one true God and wanted to proclaim his name. Seeing examples of what God created shows us how creation runs through the Old Testament storyline. His creation continues to exist and have relationship with him. Not only does his creation keep growing, but his creation also creates new things. We see them build amazing cities and write songs and play music. God's creation responds to its creator throughout the Old Testament by operating in their likeness to him. Even though they are a sinful people, they cannot deny their identity. Seeing how God uses his creation throughout the Old Testament shows us that he will never leave his people, because he uses his creation to draw more people to him, and he creates new things to spend forever with them. God continues creating things when he creates covenants with man to promise that he will restore all that had been taken away. The covenants God creates throughout the Old Testament are to bring his people closer to him. Each covenant he makes was strictly to preserve people and bring them hope until he could do all that he promised he would do. The Adamic covenant was God promising that he would bring restoration back to the original design. There would be a sacrifice to defeat the sin that so easily entangles and conquer death, the thing that would separate us from God forever. This supports the Old Testament storyline because it shows that God was not willing to leave us. He would do and did whatever it took to have us with him forever, even if it meant sending himself in the form of his son to die a gruesome death for the sin of all humanity, past, present, and future. Moving to the Noahic covenant, we see God get so enraged at our disobedience and evil sin nature that he saves one righteous and God-honoring family to try and make a holy people again. God sees his destruction of his creation and promises that he will never wipe out all people again because he loves them too much, regardless of their addiction to evil and depravity. God shows grace and compassion to people in his consistent efforts to save his people, and we see this from the sign of his covenant with all creation, the rainbow. This supports the Old Testament storyline because he loves people so much that he's unwilling to blot them out and separate from us completely. He refuses to leave completely. Noah and the ark are God's token of grace and a sign of his continued involvement with humanity. Lastly, as we look at the Abrahamic covenant, we can see God's design for bringing us back to him. The Abrahamic covenant is probably the most influential of the whole Old Testament storyline. This covenant is what sets up the genealogy of Jesus Christ and the nation of Israel rising in number to be the light of the world. God's covenant promise with Abraham stems off the Adamic covenant by promising that all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. This seems a little vague and pretty at first until we realize that this blessing to all people on earth is Jesus Christ, the human being, offspring of the woman, who will crush the serpent's head. This covenant supports the Old Testament storyline because it shows that God will not leave his people because he has a great plan for them. This great plan will not work if he leaves. We also see in this covenant that God promises that he will make Abraham into a great nation. The key part of this is that God says, I will, meaning that he is going to be the one to make it happen. In order to make something happen, you have to physically start it and maintain it. This shows that God was not going to leave his people. These examples of covenants in the Old Testament were to show that God really never leaves his people. The people of the Old Testament were never left to fend for themselves. God was always there, providing for them and taking care of them, even when the people turned their backs on him time and time again. Each covenant God made gave the people hope and allowed them to trust him fully. Whenever he fulfilled a covenant or even just continued to keep his promise, the people could see him as faithful. If he was faithful to do what he has already done, then he will be faithful to continue to do what he says he will do. As you are studying the Bible, I encourage you to look for ways God either fulfilled his promise from a covenant or where he made a new covenant with creation or a people. Be encouraged as God strengthens your belief in his ability to keep his promises.